On the night of September 29, 2015, a shocking 911 call broke the silence in a small town in upstate New York. Thomas Clayton, a former hockey player, came home from a poker game to find his wife, Kelly, lying on the kitchen floor, lifeless. The scene was disturbing. There was no sign of forced entry, but Kelly had clearly been attacked. Bloodstains on the walls showed signs of a terrible struggle. As detectives started looking into what happened, they uncovered secrets that hinted at something much darker. What really took place that night? And who was responsible for Kelly's tragic death? The truth would soon reveal a shocking twist no one expected. Kelly Elizabeth Stage was born on August 1, 1980, in Elmira, New York. She was the youngest of 3 children of Elizabeth and Howard Stage, both of whom were beloved in the community, especially Howard, who had served as the longtime chief of the local volunteer fire department. Growing up, Kelly was surrounded by her loving family, which included her brother Lenny and her older sister Kim, who, being 10 years her senior, took on a protective role in Kelly's life. The Stage household was filled with warmth and affection, allowing each family member to thrive in their own way. Kelly attended a liberal arts-focused school where she excelled, not only making the honor roll, but also standing out as a cheerleader and softball player. Those who knew her described her as someone who easily saw the good in people and situations, always radiating positivity and a zest for life. Her optimistic and outgoing nature made her naturally attract others. In 1998, Kelly graduated with a degree in education from the State University of New York, and though many assumed she would begin teaching immediately, she surprised everyone by taking a different path. She packed her bags and moved to Las Vegas, where she started working as a cocktail waitress. However, the pull of home was strong, and by 2000, she returned to Elmira to spend Christmas with her family. During this trip, she met Thomas Clayton, a man she would soon fall in love with. Thomas, a native of Binghamton, had graduated in 1998 and joined Elmira's minor league professional hockey team, where he played forward for 4 seasons. He quickly became a local star, enjoying the attention and admiration that came with his status. Some claimed that fame gave him a sense of entitlement, and he was known to engage in multiple romantic affairs simultaneously. His reckless behavior even led to an arrest after dancing naked on a bar table. Despite his wild side, Thomas and Kelly's paths crossed at a hockey game, and they were instantly drawn to each other. That same night, they ran into each other at a local bar, and their relationship blossomed from there. The couple was inseparable, and within a year they married, with Kelly taking her husband's surname and becoming known as Kelly Clayton. Around this time, Thomas's hockey career came to an abrupt end due to an injury. After retiring from the sport, the couple settled in the small town of Caton, New York, where Thomas became the owner of a franchise that specialized in water and fire damage restoration. In 2008, their first child, a daughter named Charlie, was born, and Kelly embraced motherhood with an overwhelming sense of love and devotion. A few years later, the birth of their son Cullen brought even more joy into Kelly's life, as she devoted herself entirely to her family. To those on the outside, the Claytons seemed like the perfect, happy family. Thomas focused on running his business, while Kelly balanced waitressing at a local restaurant and caring for their 2 children. Everything seemed idyllic until tragedy struck in 2015. On the night of September 29, 2015, Kelly was at home with her children while Thomas was out playing poker at a friend's house. Just after midnight, Thomas made a frantic call to 911, reporting that he had found his wife lying unresponsive on the floor. When the local sheriff's office and New York State Police arrived at the scene, a paramedic confirmed Kelly had died. Initial forensic evidence revealed she had been brutally beaten to death. Investigators found no signs of forced entry, leading them to believe that Kelly's killer may have been someone she knew. A trail of blood led from the upstairs to the kitchen, where Kelly's body was discovered, indicating that she had tried to flee during the attack. A hole in the wall at the bottom of the staircase was evidence of the sheer violence of the assault, and blood spatter on the walls and floors pointed to her having been struck repeatedly with a blunt object. While questioning Thomas and neighbors in the hours following the murder, a critical piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: Kelly's daughter, Charlie. The 7-year-old told the county sheriff that she had seen a man hurting her mother. During her conversation with the officer, Charlie revealed a chilling detail. She described how her mother had run down the hallway, yelling for her to escape. But the most haunting part of her account came when she mentioned that although the attacker had been wearing a hood, his eyes looked just like her father's. At that moment, authorities called in a child forensic investigator to assist with talking to Charlie about the traumatic event. A second interview with her took place at the county's Child Advocacy Center, where every question revolved around Thomas. According to Charlie, the mask worn by the assailant resembled one her father used when he went hunting. When asked to describe the man's size, Kelly's daughter, Charlie, said he was as tall as her father. She also pointed out a similarity in the jeans the man was wearing. Although suspicion toward Thomas grew due to the child's statements, he was at a friend's house that night, about 20 miles from his home, a drive of roughly 30 minutes. Furthermore, when he discovered Kelly's body and rushed to a neighbor's house to call 911, there was no blood on his hands or clothes, and he hadn't had enough time to clean himself up. The police were left with several unanswered questions. Thomas's alibi was corroborated by others who were with him that night. However, investigators learned that Thomas had borrowed a woman's cell phone to make a call only 90 minutes before returning home and finding Kelly's body. This raised more doubts. As the hours passed, the preliminary autopsy report on Kelly's body was released. It revealed that she had died from severe head trauma and damage to the lower part of her brain. In addition, her body was covered in bruises. She had abrasions, fractures to her face, and a serious contusion on her right hip. According to the forensic expert, the blows were so brutal that Kelly's body was almost unrecognizable, making it difficult to estimate her age and appearance. She also had defensive wounds on her arms and hands, including broken fingers, which indicated she had fought for her life. With the growing suspicion surrounding Thomas, investigators analyzed his cell phone records and noticed a high volume of messages and calls that pointed to a mysterious connection with a man named Michael Beard. In fact, Beard was the person Thomas had called the night of the murder. Michael Beard was a worker living in Elmira, in an apartment owned by the Clayton family. He had previously worked for Thomas's business and was often invited to do jobs around the family property. At the time of the crime, however, Beard had recently been fired from a similar company that also specialized in home restoration after fires and floods. State police investigators questioned Michael Beard multiple times over the next few days. Initially, he denied any involvement, but on October 2, 2015, After getting caught in several contradictions, he eventually broke down and confessed. In an unrecorded interview, Beard admitted that he had killed Kelly. He revealed chilling details, stating that Thomas had paid him $10,000 to carry out the murder. Beard then led the investigators to the place where he had hidden the murder weapon, a hammer handle stained with blood, which was found not far from the Clayton home. Beard also handed over the blood-stained clothes he wore that night and directed the authorities to a creek where he had tossed the keys to the family's home, given to him by Thomas. Forensic analysis of the blunt object used in the attack confirmed that the DNA matched Kelly's blood. Investigators determined that Beard had worn gloves during the murder, and though he had tried to dispose of them to eliminate DNA evidence, he failed to do so because the gloves belonged to Thomas. As more evidence pointed to Thomas, other discoveries raised further suspicions about him. Notably, a year before the incident, Thomas had doubled Kelly's life insurance policy from $500,000 to $1 million. During a media interview, Kelly's sister didn't hesitate to assert that Thomas stood to benefit from her death. The case became clear and justice began to move forward. With Charlie's testimony, the evidence collected, and Michael Beard's confession, prosecutors concluded that Kelly's death was a murder for hire. Both men were charged with first and second-degree murder, and it was announced that their trials would be held separately. However, a third arrest shocked everyone. Mark Blandford, another suspect, was charged with second-degree murder, robbery, and conspiracy. According to the investigation, Michael Beard had been recruited to act as a lookout and help commit a robbery at the Clayton home. He claimed he never had direct contact with Thomas and wasn't aware of any conspiracy to commit murder. His understanding was that he would be participating in a burglary. As the days passed, tensions rose during Thomas Clayton's arraignment, revealing a clear divide between the two families who had once been on good terms. Thomas's supporters sat on one side of the courtroom, while Kelly's relatives and friends occupied the other. At the hearing, Thomas pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued that Thomas had no involvement in the crime, pointing out that his alibi was solid. GPS data from his car confirmed that he was miles away, playing poker when Kelly was killed. The defense also noted that Thomas had passed a polygraph test. However, the prosecution countered by stating that the GPS evidence was irrelevant since the charges were based on a murder-for-hire plot. They also opposed the use of the polygraph test in the trial, arguing that it should not be admitted as evidence. Kelly's murder garnered significant media attention, stirring feelings of outrage and sadness within the community. Purple ribbons lined the streets, and posters demanding justice for Kelly were displayed throughout the town. For Kelly's family, the tragedy was immeasurable. Her two young children were now left without a mother, and their father was in prison. The emotional toll was immense, but so was the financial strain, as Kelly's sister, who was granted custody of the kids, suddenly faced the challenge of raising and supporting two young children. Friends and relatives rallied for support to help the children through this difficult time. In February 2016, Thomas was released from prison after posting an $850,000 bail. While awaiting trial, the judge lifted the protective order that had barred him from his home, allowing him access since the crime scene had been cleared, and the children no longer lived there. Michael Beard was the first to go to trial, but in the days leading up to it, he shockingly recanted his confession, which had not been recorded. He claimed that Thomas had hired him to burn down the house, which was supposed to be empty, to collect insurance money. According to Beard, when he arrived, he found Kelly's body and heard the children upstairs, at which point he abandoned his mission and left. Michael's defense attorney argued that his client had been coerced by the police into signing a false confession and that they would present evidence in court to prove this. On October 25th, Beard pleaded not guilty before a jury of 8 men and 4 women. He even referred to Kelly as a friend, expressing sympathy for her family. The prosecution, however, remained confident that the testimony and evidence would show that Michael and Thomas had conspired together. Despite Beard's change of story, the prosecution presented the details of his signed confession, which was read aloud during the testimony of the New York State Police investigator who had been present when Beard initially explained the events. In the confession, Beard said that Thomas had asked him to do something that could land him in prison, and though he didn't initially specify what, the tone of Thomas's request had shocked the investigator. Beard had first refused, but ultimately agreed after Thomas threatened him. Desperate for money due to unemployment, Beard accepted the offer of $10,000, with Thomas promising to provide a vehicle, a weapon, and the keys to the house. The plan was to enter the house when the children were not home, kill Kelly, and then set the house on fire to cover up the crime, making it look like a candle had caused the blaze. On the night of September 28th, Beard entered the home, went upstairs, and found Kelly lying in bed. He struck her with a blunt object, and though Kelly fought back, stumbling through the upper floor of the house, she eventually fell down the stairs. Despite being injured, she made it to the kitchen, where Beard attacked her again, delivering the fatal blows to her head. According to another investigator, Thomas had been supposed to call Beard that night as a signal, but Beard was instructed not to answer the phone. Phone records revealed that Beard's phone was turned on and off 7 times that night, the last time being at 11:45 p.m. It remained off until 1:12 a.m. on September 29th. The trial included extensive forensic evidence, such as Michael's DNA found on the blunt object used to kill Kelly. Michael's attorney argued that his client's confession was coerced, claiming he had feared his wife would be implicated if he didn't take responsibility. The defense also pointed to the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints, and questioned the reliability of witnesses, suggesting they had been influenced or had misunderstood what had happened on the night of the crime. After a 2-week trial, Michael Beard was found guilty of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The reaction from Kelly's family and friends was one of an immense relief and satisfaction. Kelly's sister publicly called Michael a coward who deserved the harshest sentence. Bringing Thomas, Kelly's husband, to justice proved more challenging. His trial began in January 2017. The case against him was complicated because all physical evidence pointed to Michael, and the district attorney couldn't use Michael's confession or call him as a witness due to Beard's retraction of his earlier statement. Instead, the prosecution relied on phone records and GPS data to build their case against Thomas, alongside a mountain of circumstantial evidence and testimony from women who claimed to have had affairs with him while he was married to Kelly. The testimonies of these women provided another potential motive for the crime. Prosecutors argued that Thomas, a businessman and former hockey player, no longer loved his wife, which was evidenced by his numerous affairs. 3 women testified that Thomas often complained about Kelly, using derogatory terms to describe her, and told them he planned to leave her because she was lazy and ungrateful. However, he also admitted to one of his lovers that he couldn't divorce Kelly because she would take everything. One of the most shocking testimonies came from a minor who was 15 years old when she had been involved with Thomas. Another key witness was a former police officer who owned a private investigation firm. He was able to cross-reference phone records and determine that Thomas and Michael had been together at various points leading up to the crime. It was also shown that Michael left his home shortly before 11 p.m. on the night of the murder, right after receiving a call from the man who had hired him. The prosecutor concluded that Thomas had masterminded the plan to end his marriage and had found the perfect scapegoat in his former employee, Michael. Thomas's defense centered on the argument that he was being falsely accused, claiming that Michael had acted alone with the sole intent of robbing the house. The prosecution called 65 witnesses and presented over 400 pieces of evidence, while the defense presented 10 witnesses and conducted rigorous cross-examinations. 7 weeks after the trial began, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before delivering their verdict. On February 23, 2017, Thomas was found guilty of first- and second-degree murder. After the verdict was read, Kelly's sister presented a letter that Charlie, Kelly's daughter, had written for the court. In it, Charlie expressed her love for both her mother and father, but called her dad a coward for making Michael kill her mom. Kelly's sister also stated that raising the children allowed her to keep her sister's memory alive and ensure that Kelly's legacy as a loving mother would never be forgotten. Thomas's family stood by him throughout the trial, and after the guilty verdict, his father expressed pride in calling him his son. The sentencing hearing took place nearly 2 months later. Thomas Clayton was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was ordered to serve his time in a New York State correctional facility. As for the third man charged in connection with the crime, it was revealed that he had reached a plea deal with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Thomas and received a sentence of 3 to 6 years in prison. In October 2018, Thomas appealed his conviction, bringing the case back into the public eye. His lawyers argued that the evidence presented at the trial, particularly the cell phone data used to track movements, was unreliable and untested. They also maintained that the prosecution had failed to prove Thomas's guilt. Despite their efforts, the appeal was denied, leaving limited options for future legal challenges. On January 20, 2023, more than 6 years after the crime, a major television network aired a true crime documentary which reignited public interest in the case. Michael Beard participated in the program, supposedly to clarify his side of the story. In the interview, he continued to claim his innocence, asserting that both Thomas and the police had set him up and that he had nothing to do with Kelly's murder. Beard stated that when he found Kelly's body, he didn't check if she was alive or call 911 because he wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. He explained that, as a black man, the mere thought of being found in the home of a dead white woman in the middle of the night terrified him. Beard also claimed that he had encountered someone else inside the house, but was unable to see their face, as the person knocked him down while fleeing. Thomas refused to be interviewed for the program, while Kelly's family shared that her children were doing well, growing up happy despite everything they had been through. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.